You're listening to Entrepreneur's Enigma, a podcast about the ups and downs of the entrepreneurial journey. Every week, your host Seth Goldstein interviews entrepreneurs from all walks of life about their entrepreneurial journeys. From store owners to Fortune 500 CEOs, we all have stories to tell. So sit back and join us for the next 20 or so minutes while we explore the entrepreneurial world.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Entrepreneur's Enigma podcast. I am, as always, your host, Seth. Today I have Bob Crimmins, who's a seasoned entrepreneur with more than 20 years of experience in the startup founder, mentor, advisor, writer, speaker, and organizer space. That was a mouthful. He's the founder and general partner of Startup Haven Ventures out in Seattle, the Pacific Northwest. But they're venturing out, no pun kind of intended. They're venturing, it actually wasn't intended, but it was kind of funny. They're venturing out into a bunch of, I think you said 11 cities right now?
18 so far.
18, wow.
Yeah.
Including Philadelphia, which is very exciting.
Yes.
And it's a pre-seed venture fund and accelerator that has grown into the largest founder and investor community of its kind, with more than 2,500 members across the United States. Now, Bob's not just some schmo off the street. He has experience. He has started when he was selling blow pops in middle school. But it's like Gary Vaynerchuk sold like baseball cards. Like it's
I came from, I don't know if you have this detail on me, but I was basically employee number one for all of my parents' first 4 companies.
Did you actually work for them, or was it kind of like a write-off?
No, I worked for, I was 9 years old, when I got my first job, doing stuff with machinery that I shouldn't. I think the laws prohibited me from even being in the building.
What?
Yet I was running those machines, and so I had that front row seat to entrepreneurship.
So you were bitten by the bug really early.
Yeah, I never would have thought that while it was happening, but when I look back at my career, I think I've had 2 jobs basically my entire life, and the rest of them were trying to build something of my own.
Well, seriously, you've co-founded 4 ventures, and you've been CEO, CTO, CMO, and CRO. Is there any more C's that you missed?
There's no more that I want. I've had enough.
We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that, exactly. And so I met Bob through a mutual friend, Buzz Brugman, who was a previous guest on the show, and he's a nut. I love Buzz.
He is an asset to the Seattle ecosystem for sure.
He really is. He's a go-getter. He's always doing something and all that. And so are you. You downplay it, but Seattle is one of those things. It's not the Valley, but it's close enough to the Valley, so it's kind of.
We have. What we suffer from. So there's a ton going on in Seattle.
Oh yeah.
And it's been up and to the right, and then down and to the right, and up and to the right. Yeah. But what we suffer from is we don't have a voice. Nobody knows what actually goes up here. Did you know that the most successful,
like Philadelphia versus New York?
There you go. The most successful accelerator cohort of all time was from Seattle, 2010. 3 unicorns, 1 IPO, and 2 multi-billion-dollar companies in one 10 company cohort in Seattle. And as a 30% unicorn rate, like, hey, small number, but that is a remarkable outcome. And we have Amazon here, we have Microsoft here, Starbucks here, Boeing's here. There's a lot of big iconic companies here.
Boeing's
a lot of talent.
Isn't Boeing's on Philly?
Well, sort of. They're international, multinational, big. Yeah. They have stuff all over the place, but started here.
Yeah.
And now Google and Facebook and you name it, everybody's here. And they came here because of the talent. And that's one of our greatest assets.
There's a lot of talent up there, and it's not as prone to wildfires. Now, at the time of this recording, unfortunately, Los Angeles is, on fire, and it's scary as crap.
It's horrible.
But you get more rain than you get fires.
Yeah, but it's a really well-behaved rain. I shouldn't say this out loud, like people from Seattle don't want the rest of the world to know this, but yes, it rains many days. But it's a very well-behaved rain. It rains lightly, off and on. I grew up in California, in Sacramento, and when it rains in Sacramento, it rains cats and dogs. It pours. It rarely
You're more like
pours.
a London fog.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a light misting.
Yeah, it's gray, but a nice gray.
Yeah. Gray. And that's the part, the gray is the hard part.
Gray is the hard part, exactly.
Yeah.
So literally, my main first question is, how did you get into all this? Well, obviously breaking labor laws at your parents' company
Yep.
at age 9.
Yes. That was the start of it. Yeah. I always had a mind for tech. I took my first computer programming class in 1978,
Don't tell
9.
people that.
I know I'm older than you think I am. And I was a teenager, and back then nobody gave a crap. Like right now,
it was Fortran, right? Fortran, Basic.
Fortran was the first class I took. Basic was the first language. Well, actually, Fortran was the first college CS class I took. I started as a CS major, but I already had a job. I was already a computer programmer by the time I started college, and so or by the time I was taking computer science classes, I was testing out of most of them just because I'd already learned it, right? But I discovered humanities and philosophy while I was doing that as well, and I fell in love with that. I mean, I already had a job as a software engineer. I knew that was going to be a career, a vocation, but my avocation was philosophy. And so I ended up getting a double major. I dropped CS and became, that was tricky. Went on to get a double major in philosophy and humanities, and then went to grad school in Seattle. That's what brought me to Seattle. I was working as a software engineer at Starbucks while I was in grad school, and I got recruited by some guys there. This was 1999, right?
Okay,
so
the
very
bubble burst.
heady days. And they needed a CTO.
Not the bubble burst yet. It was kind of mid bubble.
Yeah, the bubble hadn't happened yet. It was all bright skies.
Yeah, it was going to bubble.
The bubble was growing, and they wanted to recruit me to be CTO of a startup. And I looked at a couple of their ideas. I didn't get it. They wanted to go raise $10 million, put some servers in a room, and just take advantage of all the craziness that was going on there, but I didn't see the business in it. And finally they came to me with an idea that I thought, that could have legs. And so I took off the velvet handcuffs and joined a startup. And I was in grad school at the time.
So was that job 1 and job 2? So Starbucks was the first job, and then the startup was the second job?
No, I mean, I was a consultant. So I had a consulting firm, and I outsourced some stuff. Like if I did a contract for Starbucks, I would do something, I could bring other people into it. But the very first lesson I learned as a tech startup entrepreneur was that services companies are not venture scalable. And there was too much of a services element in this company that I thought, that might have legs. And so we tried to raise money. And the premise was that the services company would lead us to these projects that would turn into products. And then we would monetize those. We'd productize them and monetize them. And the investors, they're all very nice, but they all said, you know what? Come back to us when you have one of those.
When you have an actual item or
a product, an actual product. Products can scale, services can't scale, except in extraordinarily rare circumstances. So we went off and we found the first, product, and we productized it. We did a project for a chiropractor who had just spent like $2,000 for a binder with a bunch of white papers in it that said he was HIPAA compliant. And he said, I just paid this guy $2,000 or $3,000. Can you just tell me if I'm compliant? Just have a look. We're like, okay, we'll look. We're doing some other system stuff for him. Yeah. And we looked at it and go, you are not compliant. And in fact, a third of this document got the wrong practice name in it because somebody just did a search and replace to put in the practice name.
And $2,000-3,000.
Yeah.
And that was back in 99, which is that $2,000-3,000 is probably like $10,000 now.
Yes. And he didn't have any of the policies or procedures or anything he needed to be HIPAA compliant. He just had a binder that said his name on a bunch of paper. That's what he thought. So we thought, this market could use something like TurboTax, except for HIPAA compliance instead of tax compliance. And so we built a product for that. HIPAA checkup. It was
Not
it was
the best name. It sounds like hiccup checkup.
Yeah. Don't. I was an idiot. Don't blame me.
No, I'm not blaming you. It's just it doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well. Exactly.
But checkup and doctors, we thought we were clever actually. in any case, in that company, we raised capital and we were the best in our category. Close rate was amazing. And
because everyone else was buying binders of paper. So there really wasn't, this is
well, back
cheaper.
then it was totally different. Back then, like 85% of physicians practiced in environments of 3 to 5 physicians and less. And now it's exactly the opposite. In fact, it's even more. There's less than 15% practice in those environments.
Yeah.
So if you're a hospital or clinic, you got a legal department, you got a compliance officer, right? You can do compliance for HIPAA, right? But if you're a small practice, you couldn't. So then we thought, oh, what a great, and it was a great opportunity. And
that
also,
was your first product. Wow.
Yeah, but one of the next lessons I learned is this: if your product is dependent on a regulatory requirement, they better take that regulatory requirement seriously. And they didn't. The administration at the time was very anti-regulation, and CMS, the government body who talked about HIPAA compliance, basically said, "Yeah, don't worry about it." And
wait, the government said, "Don't worry about something."
Well, so the entire budget for HIPAA enforcement in that year was $2 million nationwide.
Oh my God!
Yeah, which is almost enough money to set up an office on K Street, right? Yeah.
It's literally like when you think about like the $1 trillion deficit, the $1 trillion we have in our budget, all that stuff.
Drop in the bucket, drop in the sea.
2 million compared to 2 billion or anything like that. 2 million is like literally $2. It's like it's a month's rent.
So suffice to say, the doctors, and they were issuing notices that said, hey, you might be exempt. There's an exemption for COVID for small practices. You might be exempt. Don't worry about it. So, that's the market we were trying to sell into. We built a great product. I learned a ton about building product. But in the end, the market was too slow. If we could have lasted long enough to wait for the next administration, then I think, but they say, being early is the same as being wrong.
It is, or sometimes you're just too wrong. And it's nothing wrong. I always say failure is not a failure unless you give up.
Yeah, well, that's so my fund. So we launched a venture fund in 2020.
Oh, really? Back then, wow.
Yeah, we're on fund 2 now, and my rule is because VCs have to mark down the companies and stop helping when they don't think it's going to be useful and there's no upside there. Whatever they got a portfolio of companies. How can you pay attention to all of them? And so there's markdown policies that every VC has. And for us, I don't mark a company to 0 until the founder tells me they're done. When the founder tells me, okay, now I'm done, then I mark it down, right? I just had a call just before this podcast with a founder who's struggling and looking for, a way to, get his groove back, get their groove back. And a lot of VCs had they invested, they probably wouldn't have even taken the call. They might've taken the call. Yeah. But they're not going to try to help. Like, it's a distressed company.
We're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, and get right back to the show.
Like, what are they going to do? Right. But as long as that founder still wants to figure it out, I want to help them figure it out. In fact, our highest performing company.
You're more of an angel VC guy because you're a nice one.
Well, because I was a founder. I mean, I had problems making payroll, right? Our team went from 21 to 4.
Oof.
Right. I know what that's like. And so, I'm there to help until they're done. And when they're done, one of our, we've only lost one company so far.
That's not bad.
And, I know we're not done. We'll lose others, I'm sure. But that founder, like, okay, what's next? In fact, he's going to,
that's my point.
Help mentor our portfolio companies. Like,
failure is not a failure until you actually call it like quits and then walk away, get a job, and write it off.
Yeah,
and failure is one of the strongest things to do. Is try stuff and say, "Oh, that didn't work. All right, next, try something new."
Well, I mean, I know that's you're speaking loosely.
Yeah, very loosely.
I mean, I have a thesis about that. I think partly having a philosophy background, coupled with technology, makes me think about that topic differently. In fact, one of the things that I spent 10 years, I can't believe it, developing a decision-making framework to help founders think through how to make those decisions.
Yeah.
And, we teach that in our accelerator. I use that. That's actually how I select company. When I select a company for direct investment too, we make direct investments and through the accelerator. I have conversations with those founders to see if they're rational, disciplined, they have the curiosity to figure this out, or do they just think this is going to be big and I just need you to pay for experiments for me to go figure it out?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't be successful. That some of those turn out to be successful, but I want someone who wants to really roll up their sleeves and go, God, what would have to be true in order for me to raise my next round of funding? Because at pre-seed, if you can't raise your next round of funding, you're done. That's where pre-seed goes to die. So
curiosity.
I want founders, some VCs or mentors or whatever, they'll refer to it as coachable, and it's partly coachable. That's certainly important. If I sense that a founder's not coachable, I'm not very interested. But if they recognize, wow, this is really hard, 95% to fail. Like, introduce me, Seth, to any founder. I don't care if they went to Stanford. I don't care if they got, some friends and family money and angel money, and they've got I would successfully bet against every founder who's just getting started, because you're 95% to fail. I mean, if there's a marketplace where you could make a bet with odds and it's 95% to fail.
I'm sure there's not a startup for that already. I'm sure there is.
Well, I hope there never is, because it's, at the end of the day, this failure rate is not just about investors lose their capital and, founders lose their dream. The impact that it has on founders' lives is tremendous. It's in you. I mean, you identify with your startup. People trusted you, your team, your family. Like, this is not your spouse's dream, right?
No.
But they went along for the ride, and you worked too much and you were really stressed out and all this stuff. And on the promise that something good was going to happen. And when it doesn't happen, that's just ridiculously hard to take as a founder, right?
It is.
So
it's personal.
It totally is. So I want founders to be successful, not just so that my portfolio does well, but because I know the personal burden of failure and what that feels like and what that does to you. I want founders who are like, I think I'm going to try to do something really hard. And I want to find people who can help me navigate this, figure out the things that I don't know, and help me connect with people who do know about those things so I can validate some of the things that I think about and try to get there. Because if you're just getting started, I'm sorry, but you're probably going to fail.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a bad way.
The first time either. It's not going to be the last time.
So your job as a founder is to improve the probability of success. There's nothing you can do that guarantees success, but there are a couple things, and there's not very many, actually. Okay. There are only a couple things you can do to improve the probability of your success. And, listening to podcasts is not one of them. I'm sorry. Reading some exited founders, here's my 5 tips for being a successful founder. That's not going to help you at all. 0, right?
Yeah.
Most of the mentors and advisors aren't going to help you because they can't go deep enough to understand you well enough, and to be there in context when you have to make decisions. Decisions are the things that you need to improve. Yes. Every day, founders get up and make decisions in an environment of limited information. These are probabilistic decisions in an environment with very little time. The clock is running. Like,
it's really
most founders I know, they're super smart, and they're passionate, and I want it to be successful. But unless you recognize that you're under the constraint of time, you're probably going to run out of time before you run out of money. In fact, when I see blog posts by founders who say, hey, sad news today. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to build this startup, the people I worked with. Oh, it's so great, but we're shutting it down. And, somewhere in that post might be a reference to, we couldn't raise money. We ran out of money. And if you look at everybody's top 10 lists of why founders fail, the number one thing is ran out of money. And then it's usually didn't find product market fit. And then it's, some team thing or whatever it was. There's some things, different lists.
There's a hierarchy of it. Yeah.
But you know what the number one should be? They ran out of time. Not that they ran out of money. If you ever had any amount of money and you failed, it's because you didn't get to a strategic milestone that unlocked some next thing for the company. And one of two things is true. Either there was no possible milestone that you ever could have gotten to with the amount of resources that you had, Or there was a possible milestone that you could have gotten to with the resources that you had, and you didn't get to it. But when I talk to founders and I say, what do you think your next right strategic milestone is? They can't tell. They'll have a milestone about, yeah, we're going to do this new platform. We're going to introduce this new feature. It's lots and lots and lots of product ideas about what they need to do. We're raising money so we can do these things because we got to build this, the Taj
They
Mahal.
have to unlock that next achievement.
Yeah. And if your investors don't care, I mean, I can't even tell you how little investors care about product. It's the cost of entry. Like, you don't have a product? I'm not even going to talk to you. Right. I mean, idea stage, there are some investors that invest at idea stage. I get that. I'm not one of them, but if you haven't built something, then it's really hard to raise any
intangible.
Yeah. And this is not to knock on the bootstrapping founders who are figuring it out and not taking money or trying to raise money before they have a product. I get that. If you're in a hot space or you're, MIT or like, there's things you could have in your pedigree and you can get money without having a product. I get it. Exit a founder, go do it, and more power to you. But most founders aren't like that, right? Most founders are like, okay, I have this idea and I want to build this into a company. I'll go raise money. And they think that the investors will be as impressed as they are about their product. But what investors care about is not the product. They care about the business. They care about the problem you're solving and whether or not the market's going to pay for it so that you can continue to grow a business. Not,
and grow their nut too.
And certainly there's a minimum amount of product you have to have in order to sell it. But, I wish there was a greater understanding around what an MVP is. It's used so loosely in so many contexts that it's lost its meaning. Because having an MVP is not having a product. An MVP, a minimum viable production product. Like, what's the minimum thing that you can sell to a customer that solves some of their problem now, right?
Exactly.
And if you can find out in your market, like I was talking to a founder the other day, tell me about your ideal customer profile. And they had this notion of this, and that would be a great customer. Yeah. But who's your ideal next customer? Like the ones you want to get now, because the one you just described is a 9-month sales cycle and you got to build a bunch of tech and all there's compliance issues and they're going to worry about security and you're a startup. And what it turns out is that, of all the 16,000 of those kinds of companies out there, some of them are big, some are small. Like, what are the 20 that you can find signals on that can help you know that they want your product today for what you've already built? And that thing solves their problem, right? And customer discovery is such an important thing because it helps you understand who your first customers are, right? And if you use customer development to figure out that there's just the big market there, and too many founders use customer development to validate that there's a market. And customer development can help you do that, but it's not its superpower. The superpower of customer development is you figuring out who the right next customer is, right? That you can sell to first. So you can get the engine running and you can get like something that looks like traction that goes up into the right every month. The numbers can be small, but just exercising that muscle and just figuring out the first part of the path. Because a friend of mine starts as jumping from lily pad to lily pad, and you don't get to jump across the pond.
No,
it doesn't work that way, right? You can only jump so far, and if you try to jump in a direction that doesn't have a lily pad that you've identified they're going to land on, you're going to drown. So you got to figure out what are the 7 or 9 or 25 lily pads you got to navigate. Next one.
Love that, yeah.
And too many founders they miss that. And I get it. Vision, it's big, it's huge. It's so valuable. Blah blah blah. Yeah, but you got to get there.
You got to get there. Absolutely.
The there picture sounds great. I want to know the here to there picture.
The roadmap, exactly.
Yeah.
So, what is the most important thing that you carry with you all the time, both as a founder and as an investor, as a coach, as a mentor, all that stuff? Like, what's the most important thing you carry with you? So it should be, I expect a woo-woo answer because you're a philosopher.
Yeah. I hope not too woo-woo, but the reality is startups are built by people. And, people come packed with lots of their own experiences and their own strengths and weaknesses. And it's important as an investor, as a mentor, coach, advisor. I want to help that founder figure out what's right for them. Sometimes that means I could be an investor. Sometimes it means I can't be an investor.
Yeah.
But even if I can't be an investor, I'm still rooting for you, right?
Yeah.
And I'll still try to help you. And that's, started paving that network of all those founders, investors. I've been doing this now for 19 years. That started in 2006. And the reason I kept it going all these years, because it's just a passport. It doesn't make a profit. It's never made a profit in 19 years. The reason that I wanted to keep that going, because I saw, and the word power doesn't even capture it. The power of getting founders and investors together in a quiet space where it's just them and they can help each other. Because there's no help. I should be careful about superlatives, but look, if you're a founder, you're going to need help from people.
Yeah.
And you're going to get help from lots of places, from your lawyer and from your banker and from your real estate guy. You're going to get help from those guys. The very best help you're going to get is going to come from people that you know. And the most valuable of those are other founders, investors who really understand what you're going through, trying to accomplish, how hard it is, and can help you navigate the patterns. Because when you're early, you don't have the patterns. You don't know the pattern. You do this long enough, like me, you start to see the patterns. And that's why really experienced advisors can be super, you want to do that thing. Well, I've seen that 11 times and it never worked any of those times. So let me tell you what you should be on the lookout for. So if you want to do that, you should know that this other thing and this other thing is going to be harder than you think. It take longer than you think, be more expensive than you think. For me, and this is the philosophy part. So for me, after doing that for so many years, I've been a very avid mentor advisor. I thought what I saw was something beyond the pattern. Yeah, I see the patterns. I see a ton of patterns. Hundreds of companies. I see a lot of patterns.
Pattern recognition, yeah.
But there are principles that underlie this pattern. Why are those patterns that way? I think I saw them. 10 years ago, I was like, oh my God, wait a minute. The startups fail. All these patterns come from different things, but there's two underlying things that drive the majority of the challenges for startups. Uncertainty and time. Those are the things. You got to make all those uncertain decisions with limited time and limited resources. So if you don't know that, what you might do is you might think, oh, well, we just need to experiment our way through it. Or you might think, you might not worry about when we say we're going to do this campaign and we think it's going to be successful, we don't think necessarily that, well, okay, how many days and weeks will it take for you to set it up, to get the results, to experiment again, and you don't get that time back. One of the lessons I learned at Starbucks. So Starbucks, when I joined them many years ago, had a few thousand stores, and they were maniacal about opening a store on time. They had a schedule. Store's supposed to open on that day.
And damn better, yeah.
If they miss that date by a week, that's a week of revenue they will never, ever get back. And if you're opening up hundreds of stores a year and you miss, 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, that's, you can't oh yeah, but when we finally do open, we'll sell coffee harder and we'll get that revenue back. Right. No. So, they had a strategic plan that requires, in order for them to meet their objectives, they have to open stores when they said they were going to open them. And if a store was starting to look distressed, it was all hands on deck, wait, that store cannot open late. What do we need to do to get that store to open on time? Because we know we're going to lose that revenue. We'll never get it back. We can't ever recoup that lost revenue. That's in essence, the underlying challenge I think many founders have to overcome is you never get time back. Right?
Time's finite.
It's not whether or not that market's big. It's not whether or not you saw the right problems, not whether you got the right team, you can build the right product. Can you do it in time? Because if you can't do it in time, you're not going to raise your next round of funding. So where do you need to be next? What's the right next strategic milestone? Not what's your strategic milestone. If you ask somebody what's their milestone or their strategic milestone, they'll give you some answer. The vast majority of the time, it will have nothing to do, and their next investors, especially at pre-seed and seed, their next investors will not agree with them that that's the milestone that they should have in mind, but that's what they have in mind. And when you actually ask them, well, explain to me what that unlocks in the company, that your next investors will recognize as the thing they like to fund. Because, if you have some way to, grow money on trees, great. If you're
Please tell
bootstrapping,
me. I would love to buy one of them.
if
How
you want to
long
be a
would it take?
bootstrapper,
Yeah.
go for it. No, you can do whatever you want. If you want to be a venture scale company and raise venture capital to do that, then you have to sort of play that game. A founder I know, very sharp founder, is like, oh yeah, you got to game the system. No, you don't. You just need to understand the game. You don't have to game it. You don't have to fool it. You don't have to trick. Like, oh, I'm going to trick those investors. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get some early customers first, just so they'll invest in me, right? No, they want you to do that because that improves the
It's what you need to
probability of your
do.
success, right? They don't have these willy-nilly, preferences. So founders need to recognize that the clock is running. And when they, spend a month doing an experiment that didn't work, if they didn't model that first and try to make it fail on paper first, that's a month they never get back. And it's a wasted month, right? So many of the plans, roadmaps and campaigns and whatnot that I see, like if you go deep on what they're assuming must be true in order for that to be successful, you start to see like, wait, you think you can do that? How fast? Whoa, no. If you think, if it's some bigger thing, like, oh, we're going to hire SDRs and then those SDRs are going to, set up demos and we're going to close this percentage or whatever. Okay, good. Do you have those SDRs yet? Well, no. When are you going to hire them? I see here in your plan, it's month 1, 3 SDRs. You don't have them yet. How long does it take you to source 3 SDRs and
get good ones
get good ones, get them trained up on your stuff, get them to be fully, not in a month, not in 3 months.
No.
So everything that you say you're going to do is now a back adjusted at least 3 or 4 months.
Yeah,
so don't think you're going to do that. And what happens is if you don't do that math, sort of, quantify the assumptions that you're making and figure out what must be true, you will end up someplace later on realizing that didn't work. And you'll be already spun over to the next thing that you also didn't model to see if that was even probable.
It's exhausting, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a sort of cult of experimentation in startups that is really, really counterproductive. And, the lean movement got really fired that up. And it's a useful tool, but
it's a tool. It's a tool.
Yeah.
It's not the be all end all. Exactly.
And it comes with a lot of liabilities that I guarantee you founders don't think about the liabilities of experiments. They think about, but we're going to get real data. We're really going to figure it out, right? We're going to go ask investors to fund those experiments. And, the investors have a built-in incentive to wait and see and watch, does it work? Right. So if you're a founder and you're a place where you think there's really great things coming next and you've identified what you think you're going to do, it's in investors' interest to watch you, to tell you, thanks, put us on your update list, love what you're working on, here's something I'd like to see or whatever. But they're incented to just wait and see if the experiment works. If the experiment works, it's not like, most experiments don't change your valuation, right?
No.
Right. So they're better off waiting. Let's see if that experiment works.
Absolutely. So Bob, people can find you at startuphaven.com. And that's, follow you on Startup Haven's LinkedIn page as well.
Yep.
You have a YouTube link that we'll have in the show notes. And, you're in 18 cities now, including Philadelphia. So keep an eye out. We'll have blast it out.
And I will say too, a lot of founders come to us too early to Startup Haven. Startup Haven has a fairly low bar to join, and it's free to join. Like I said, it doesn't make a profit, but you have to be working full time on your startup. Your startup has to be in principle venture scalable, right? So, if you're, making jars of jelly and you're selling them at the market, that's probably not venture scale, right? At least not yet. If you want to do a restaurant, probably not venture scale, right? Not that there's not investors who would invest in your restaurant, but it's not the kind of,
it's not what you're looking for.
It doesn't have the same set of problems that growth companies, venture scale growth companies have.
Own set of
problems. And so our objective is to get all those people who share and understand that same set of problems all together. And you have to have some elements of traction, commercialization, progress. You can't just quit your job at Meta and say, I'm a founder, and join Startup Haven. You have to you have to be in it for a minute,
In it
and
for a minute. I love that. Yeah.
be able to accept the help that's going to be available to you. Because a lot of founders, they try to join Startup Haven and think, I'm going to meet all these really great founders, we get all this great help. And if they're not full time, or they're just like haven't even just got started, they're going to meet some founder investor like, oh yeah, you should meet this person, or I want to talk to you about investment or whatever.
Ready for it, yeah.
But you can't even accept it. You can't act. It's not actionable, right? And by the way, you're just getting started. Unless you're a serial founder, you're unlikely to be able to add a lot of value to other founders and investors. Certainly domain expertise is important, right? And you might be, good with technology or accounting or whatever you're good at. But that's not that doesn't move the needle for venture scale founders and investors. Like what moves the needle is founders and companies that you can tell a coded story about how they could build something meaningful. And so, we don't have an exact number of months you must have been, full-time working on your venture scale company, but there are things we look for to see, what have you done that's meaningful? So yeah, and I'm happy to have every founder, regardless of sector or stage, join Startup Haven, join the network, raise your hand, and
see if you're the right fit.
Agree to help other founders if you can. That's all we ask. Like if you want to join Startup Haven, yes, get as much help as you can, but also be available to give help
others out.
If you can.
Givers gain. Exactly. And on that note, we'll see everyone next week.
All right. Thanks, man.
That was a great show. If you're enjoying Entrepreneur's Enigma, please consider giving us a review in the podcast directory of your choice. Every review helps us reach new listeners. If you like Entrepreneur's Enigma, consider the other shows on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net.
Goldstein Media hopes you have enjoyed this episode.